Okay, we're live now.
Call the meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. Hello, everyone, and let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I have a statement to read. Just give me 1 second to pull that up. I do not have it ready to go. Okay. Consistent with the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, and Regulation 940 CMR 29.10, which allows for remote participation in certain circumstances under the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law regulations, the Mendon-Upton Regional School Committee will be conducting this meeting remotely. In this particular case, all 6 members of the committee are participating remotely and virtually through video conferencing. This is consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 10th, 2020, which eased the requirements of having a meeting in a physical space open to the public and having a quorum of the committee physically present. Any and all votes will be conducted by roll call votes. Per usual, this meeting will also be live streamed and recorded. All right. So next is the approval of the agenda. Can you get a motion to approve tonight's agenda, please?
Motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
We'll vote by roll call.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil Desutter, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Dorothy Scally, aye.
Vicki Ludwigson, aye. So the agenda is approved. Next, can we get a motion to approve the open session minutes of December 7th, 2020?
Make a motion to approve the open session minutes of December 7th, 2020.
Second.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil Desutter, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Dorothy Scally, aye.
Vicki Ludwigson, aye. The minutes are approved. So next up, we have student comments. Owen?
All right. Good evening, and as usual, I would like to start by thanking you all for having me tonight. It means a lot to be able to speak here. All right. Good evening. I hope it's been a good start for the new year for everyone. I know that we are all looking forward to a healthier 2021. I know that I'm remaining hopeful that the health crisis eases and that we are able to celebrate senior events several months from now. So, a few updates for everyone. First, along with my classmates, we've been transitioning back to school remotely since vacation. So things are looking a lot different right now. I'm taking all my classes online, obviously, and I feel like I'm still getting a lot of the really good instruction that I've come to expect from Nipmuc. In particular, I'd like to kind of highlight Mr. McIsaac, who's been having us do a lot of projects. So that kind of interactive learning has been super helpful, especially while we're still in remote. And yeah, all the teachers at Nipmuc are doing a really, really good job. And yeah, it's going very well. So one of the parts of the first semester that stands out to me in terms of remote learning is the fact that we've all been able to really move through the material and kind of retain it at we've kind of personally we've exceeded expectations in that regard. I remember at the beginning of the school year the thought that we would get through an entire year of material in half the amount of time. It seems very daunting, and the fact that a lot of my teachers have been able to do this is really just shows how hard they're all working. And yeah, no. Again, I'd like to just thank the teachers for the excellent job that they're doing. And yeah. So last week, Nipmuc welcomed the girls basketball team to receive the Sportsmanship Award from the MIAA. Our team was scheduled to receive the award prior to the state championship game last spring. However, the health crisis prevented the event from being held. Nipmuc's team was one of the only 2 statewide recipients of this award. More than 360 teams were eligible for the honor, highlighting how our team stands out for setting an example of sportsmanship for schools across the state. Also, we have the school counseling breakfast with the counselors. Tomorrow, Nipmuc's school counseling department will be hosting a breakfast with the counselors workshop called All About Anxiety. The event will be hosted on Zoom. Find out how to register on the latest edition of the Nipmuc newsletter. And that pretty much concludes my report, though before I finish up, I would like to congratulate Mr. King on his retirement. He has been a real star of a teacher at Nipmuc, and we wish him all the best.
Thanks, Owen. Always good to hear from you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you being here. Next up, we have superintendent's comments.
All right, good evening, everybody. First off, I just would like to report out that we did receive some initial guidance in very broad terms from the Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley, regarding MCAS administration for this coming spring. Again, it's in broad terms, but we do know 3 or 4 key pieces, without drilling into a lot of details. But first off, this year's senior class, just like last year, so for the class of 21, they are not responsible for earning the CD or the competency determination that is specifically passing the MCAS in ELA, math, and science. It generally is not an issue at MCAS. We generally, by the junior year, have everybody in very, very good shape, and everybody has passed it, if not on the first time, the second time. Just like they did last year, high schools will have the autonomy to use a process of transcript to review to ensure that students are meeting the standards that they need to be. Second, which I think is most applicable to everyone, is that MCAS will not be eliminated for the spring, but rather it'll be a shortened test frame for all students in grades 3 through 8. And what the memo, as it is in your packet, states that the testing time will be significantly reduced. So we're hearing that it'll probably be, instead of 3 sessions per test, it probably will be something in the ballpark of 1 session per test. But again, we don't have the specifics on that yet. Third, for our students who are still learning English, the access test, which is the state assessment for measuring English proficiency, will have an extended testing window. Usually that is occurring towards the end of this month into February, but rather that testing window is going to go much later into the month of May. And then last, this year, like last year, because of the disruption due to the pandemic, will be a hold harmless year with regard to accountability classifications. So therefore, we will be in the same situation where we will essentially have the same classification as we did based upon the 2019 results. So any questions on that piece?
For MCAS, would you expect that the testing dates would still take place during the typical time frame, like April, May, just on fewer days?
Correct. Yeah, the same time frame will occur. Probably significantly, and I will keep all of you apprised. There was no information about the grade 10 testing. Note that that was only 3 through 8. I think 10, which is the most significant testing, and it's also going to have implications specifically for Nipmuc and many, many other high schools across the state that, because of the pandemic, have adopted the 4x4 block schedule. That's going to have implications as well. So we anticipate getting more specific information regarding that, and probably a little bit of a later testing window with that test for grade 10, because it is a high stakes test. Second piece that I want to report out that has received some attention across the state are the recent requirements in student learning time that the Department of Ed has put upon all schools and districts. And it is an interesting piece because this is something that came about in the month of December after all superintendents filled out a survey to kind of put in place how many hours of live instruction being defined as in-person instruction or synchronous remote instruction that students at the elementary, at the middle, and at the high school were receiving. So superintendents filled this out in November, and then DESE looked at the data, and then we were informed shortly before the holidays that districts and schools in a hybrid model such as ours must provide students with access to 35 hours of live instruction over a 10-day school period, or basically every 2 weeks. It should be 35 hours on the average across all districts, across all grade levels. Second piece in the requirements is that students must have the opportunity to have at least on a daily basis with a live check-in between students and their teachers. So those are really the two key pieces that we're responsible for. Keep in mind, it's 35 hours of instructional time. So things like lunch, recess, breaks, and so on cannot be counted. So across our district at the elementary level, across all 3 levels, quite frankly, we're coming up short. At the elementary level, we have 28 hours. At the middle school, we've got 30, and Nipmuc comes the closest at 32. When you define that across the district, obviously 28, 30, and 32 comes out to be 30. So across all 3 levels, as I said, we need to add hours on a weekly basis. At the elementary level, it's about 3.5 hours. At MISCO, it's about 2.5 hours. And at Nipmuc, it is an hour and a half. So that's significant. And the good news is that we have our scheduling committees at the elementary, the middle, and the high school levels that worked in earnest over the summer months to come up with the schedule that we have. We're kind of putting it back on the scheduling committees to come up with the best possible solutions for our students and also to meet these requirements. I think one piece too that is also significant to ensure that it's happening on a consistent basis, and again, I think we have our holes at the secondary level, is ensuring that there's at least a daily check-in for our students with their teachers during those 2 asynchronous learning days. So that work is going on, and it has to happen in short order because the expectation is that we meet these SLT or student learning time requirements by a week from tomorrow, by Tuesday, January 19th. As I say in my background notes to you, that I will report progress and kind of talk about the specific changes that have been made at our next meeting 2 weeks from tonight. Does anybody have any questions on any of that?
Do we have, I mean, are there initial ideas on how that time on learning will be made up, or?
I think the key thing is probably thinking about how we add more synchronous learning opportunities during the asynchronous learning days. And I think that's probably the primary mechanism that we're looking at to make up those hours, Phil.
Okay.
So this is not with respect to the remote learning days we have in place today. This is only during the hybrid model.
Correct.
Okay, understood.
Correct. And then last but not least, you have in your packet the most current year-to-date expenditure report for FY21. Jay, do you have any specific line items that you'd like to highlight or anything specific to mention?
Nothing in the line items in and of themselves. We do have some issues. The boiler, one of the boilers at Nipmuc has part of the firing tubes has cracked again. It's probably the 10th or 12th time. We are going to have to explore potentially an option to replace those boilers, I think, sooner than I had hoped, which means we may be coming back to you at some point to use some of the stabilization money that we put aside several years ago. I don't think there's any other option. The initial step we're going to take with that is we're going to do an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications, to in essence hire somebody that can be our consultant to help with any capital projects that we have over the next 5 years, because I think we have some. But unfortunately, that boiler is going to have to be addressed sooner rather than later. I think we're going to try and get it through this year, but we've had multiple problems. We also had a problem with the boiler at Clough, which is getting replaced through an insurance claim. So that's not going to cost us anything, and that work is ongoing right now. One of the boilers at Nipmuc stopped firing last week, and that's being worked on, I believe, the end of this week or the beginning of next week. Memorial's boilers seem to be fine right now. So there's that, which may or may not have an expense out of the operational. Hopefully it won't. The only other challenge that we've had this year is unemployment, not because we had a lot of unemployment claims, but it's been a statewide problem that there are hundreds of fraudulent unemployment claims coming through the system. So we had to increase that budget line quite considerably in order to cover some of that. Some of that we will get back, and we're fighting everything that comes through, but it's taking a lot of time. I know that there are some school districts that have actually gone out and hired somebody to handle that. We've had probably over 100 fraudulent claims. I know I've read that Worcester had over 400 fraudulent claims. And it's just a matter of continuing to fight them, but it's not the easiest thing to do. And it's a fairly tiered process. Other than that, budget-wise, we seem to be moving along fairly well so far. So I'm okay with that. That's about it. Questions, Phil?
Well,
I'm good.
fraudulent claims coming in from what?
Unemployment. For example, I got an unemployment claim. I got a letter saying my unemployment claim had been approved. I never filed for it, but
yeah. So
there, obviously we're not going to pay that, but they're giving you a lot of leeway. I actually did a webinar with John Robertson, a former school committee member here, and he's head of the MMA now, legislative team. Talking, it's a statewide problem, and I don't know if it's from the data breaches that happened a few years ago, but they've gotten a lot of stuff and they put in these claims and they're just flying through.
Yeah, I think there's an article, I think it was either last week in the Globe or whatever.
Yeah.
It had talked about like $36 billion worth of fraudulent claims, I think in the last 9 months. Of last year.
I mean, we had some claims for some of the layoffs that didn't get called back for that period of time. And that's a claim that we have to pay. That's not an issue. But the fraudulent ones, people that were never laid off, never had a problem, like myself, I think I worked all the time. Those are the kind of claims. And we've had a lot of them. Like I said, I think we're spending a lot of time on them.
And then it sounds like we just got to keep getting the boilers fixed.
Yeah, the boilers.
It's our traditional January problem.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think we're going to have to address Clough or Nipmuc sooner rather than later. which is unfortunate, but we're going to see. So I worked with Habib Associates, who worked with us on the project at MISCO a few years ago, and they were really, really, really good. We're going to work with them, but we're going to go out and get a request for qualifications to get a design firm to help us, whether it's a Habib and Associates or another firm. We'll find out after we put out the RFQ. But that's the first step. I don't have the expertise to write an RFP for replacing boilers. It's beyond my scope.
Great. Thanks, Jay. So next up, we have subcommittee updates. Phil, can you give us an update on the budget subcommittee?
Well, I could defer to Sean since he's the chairperson now.
Ah,
Oh, whoops.
right.
My bad. Sorry.
Sorry, Sean.
That's one of the things we did at the last budget subcommittee. We reorganized. So Phil was good enough to take up the mantle of recording our minutes. So thank you, Phil. That's actually the harder job, I think. But yeah, so just briefly, we went over the calendar of budget events for the coming year. And we've got a lot of work to do to reconcile the budget with a lot of moving parts this year. So I'm sure that Joe will like to chime in on what all those moving parts are, but essentially, we don't have a clear picture of where the state stands with their financing. And our costs are pretty complicated for this year because of the COVID response. So we probably won't have a clearer picture until, I would estimate, probably next school committee meeting we'll start to have a clearer picture. But the budget,
Well, like you said, there's a lot of moving parts. The good news, conceivably, that could be affecting the FY22 budget is Massachusetts is slated to receive approximately 1.3 billion in this latest round of stimulus funds. We don't know specifically what restrictions, what limitations they'll be used for, but we've been told that they are going to be disseminated proportionally based upon your Title I funding that you received for the previous fiscal year. And we're told that you can anticipate approximately 3.7 to 3.8 times the amount of funding that we got last year through the CARES Act funding. So that could conceivably be good news. However, I do need to put the caveat out there that, again, we need to see how that money can be used, because again, that's one-time only money. So that's another fly in the ointment. We talked usually, as we do during that first budget subcommittee meeting, about kind of the big picture. We're always very, very careful and very deliberate, the budget subcommittee and the school committee on a whole, in being very deliberate in tracing our budget to what our strategic goals are, as detailed in our yearly district action plans and our strategic plan. That will continue, but I think if there's anything that, again, for lack of a better term, would be the theme of this coming fiscal year's budget, it's really going to be around, coming out of this pandemic and what are the critical needs. And as we've discussed, a lot of it is going to be tied to social emotional learning and students' mental health, and also some of the remediation efforts that are needed due to gaps. So more details, I believe we meet 2 weeks from tonight. We will not have the first pass ready by then, because I believe 2 weeks from Wednesday is when the governor's budget is released. But then the following school committee meeting, we should have a first pass budget with a lot of the details and the specifics filled in.
my apologies, Joe. And also, I think one more point is that we are consistently, just to remind everyone that there is a lot more burden being put on the towns within the state budget, and we don't really have any understanding what that's going to be within the COVID year this year. But consistently, we are getting more of a burden put on the towns over history. So that's pretty much it for the update.
Great. Thanks, Sean. And the next item on the agenda is new business.
So first thing, I think on the agenda, just some updates with regard to instructional model planning. And this is kind of the reality of where we are with the challenges of COVID. We are continuing the planning process for greater in-person instruction, kind of trying to look at creative ways to bring back more elementary students for in-person instruction, particularly so that it can be implemented when this spike that we're currently experiencing has abated. As I said in my email to all of our families last Thursday evening, I'm going to continue to make decisions about full remote versus hybrid each Thursday evening, because as you probably know, the Thursday evening is when the Massachusetts Department of Public Health puts out its community by community report. But again, we look at the data of what's happening within our district. The last week or so has been really, really challenging. With our cases today, I think we're up to about 29 cases in total within the last 2 weeks, just within our district alone. And with some of the cases over the weekend and today, we're at approximately 115 students in quarantine. And a lot of this seems to have a heavier preponderance at Nipmuc. It's across all schools, but it definitely seems to be heavier there. So again, I continue to monitor the data, and on a nightly basis, we'll be updating our COVID-19 dashboard. Something that we haven't put an all call out to, but we've informed all of our student athletes and our families, but we made the decision over the weekend to put a pause on interscholastic athletics at both Nipmuc and Misco for the simple reason of infections and quarantining. We had over the weekend, one of our teams completely shut down due to infections, and another was a team that did not have enough students to appropriately field a team due to students in quarantine. So again, that's something that we're watching very, very carefully, and we're acting, in my opinion, prudently and proactively. I've also received some questions regarding pool testing. I believe over the weekend, there's been some reports in the media about the Department of Education in conjunction with DPH making pool testing available to districts. I did receive Friday afternoon a email and a memo from the Department of Education. And tomorrow morning, there is a webinar for district leaders and lead nurses to learn more about this offering. And our next school committee meeting, I will report that back to you. Any questions on any of that? Okay, the next item that we have is a request and my recommendation in the affirmative regarding the Nipmuc field trip to Paris, which I believe 2 years ago was approved by this committee. And basically, we're looking to kind of move the date of this in a hopeful way to June 15th, with the assumption that the conditions will be much improved. And it will really give the travel opportunity, particularly to our seniors. This will kind of be their last chance, so to speak. You have before you in the packet all of the information specifically about the refund policy from Explorica. I know Kate is present. Kate, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add specifically about either the refund policy or your expectations or anything of that sort.
Sure. So we met as a group about a month ago, and I feel like in the last month, things have gotten a little worse. So when I was really optimistic last month, it's starting to dwindle a tiny bit, but it's still there because we need to do this. We need to go somewhere. But the feeling of the seniors were that they wanted the trip if it could possibly happen. And I understand, because I thought about, let's just talk about 2022 and not really worry about this. So obviously there's the caveat of everything falling into place and countries being open and it being safe to travel. There is also another option of, obviously, if they're not letting us in, Explorica will reschedule everything. But 60 days prior, so that's about April vacation, I still have the opportunity to move the date at no cost. So that's something that usually doesn't happen. So if we get to the beginning of April and it doesn't seem like it's going to happen still, we could just move it to the next June and allow any senior who was already signed up. They will have just finished their freshman year of college. If you were okay with that, as long as it wasn't anyone new, anyone who was originally signed up, they could go if they still wanted to. The numbers are starting to dwindle from even what I had sent you. I have 8 seniors right now and 7 underclassmen. So that's who is still signed up. They have until Thursday to get the best refund policy, as long as they email by then. I'll be emailing them right after this so they know that they can do that. And then they still have until about the end of February to get the second tier of the cancellation fee, which is only a little bit more than the best tier. So right now it's $300 fee. If they have the plus insurance, they can recoup 75% of that fee. Every year I learn something new on these trips. I make people get the insurance now, but I never make them get the plus. Now I will make them get the plus from here on out. You just have the better cancellation policy with that. So I'm still optimistic, cautiously optimistic. I could be back here in April and we could just be saying, let's do it next June 2022 and call it a day. But figured I wanted to see what we could do. I mean, we have wiggle room and there's ways out, so we're not locked in as much. So questions? I know this might seem insane that we're even talking about this.
So this proposal is to move the trip from April to June this year?
Yes.
Okay, understood.
And if that maybe the next few months, everything falls into place, that it could happen. But parents are aware of all the same options as well, that come April, if it doesn't look good, we'll move it again.
So, okay, so if April comes and there are travel restrictions and, testing requirements and all that lovely stuff, quarantine and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's like, we're going to go for a week, but we have to quarantine for 14 days when we get there. Might not make a lot of sense.
That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And I mean, they might be mandating a vaccine, and if students can't get it or don't want it. So there's all of that to take into consideration. But I thought this at least buys us some time to see how the next 2-3 months pan out.
Okay.
Yep, sounds like a good plan. Motion to approve a change from April to June this year for the Paris and Côte d'Azur field trip.
Second.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil DeZutter, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Dorothy Skelly, aye.
Vicky Ludwigson, aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll be back soon to talk about April 2022.
Right. Sounds good. All right. And we have a recertification of the 2021 Mercy budget.
Yes, that's correct. So in front of you, you have a series of, I believe, 5 motions. That is to recertify the budget. I believe this is your second recertification. If you recall, you had your original certification at our budget hearing back on March 9th. Then in the midst of the financial crisis due to the pandemic, you recertified on May 5th using some very conservative numbers, particularly with regard to the state funding. This is a second, but also finalized certification for the simple reason that just before the holidays, the FY21 state budget was finalized. So the only numbers that are different here are the state funding numbers. And then I believe also, correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, some of the charter school tuition reimbursement funds as well. Everything that's basically in motion number 4, correct?
Motion number 4 and motion number 5. There's like 2, but there's changes in every motion. The reason for that is we got less state aid, less transportation aid than what you certified in May. Therefore, the town's share of transportation is going up. Offsetting that is a reduction in the operational additional because the net can't change. So there's that adjustment. There's an E&D appropriation in this now. We talked about that once before. That's because we could not use circuit breaker that we received last year for extraordinary relief. We couldn't use it this year. We had to use it last year, which meant the savings by applying it rolled into E&D, and we're now going to apply it to this year. The bottom line to all of this is that this budget actually is going to end up being about $64,000 less than what you certified in May. The total certification is more, but you're putting E&D in and taking away state aid. So the net comes out to that. It's kind of complicated, but ultimately, you know, from the town's perspective, nothing changes. From our perspective, the only real change is an E&D appropriation that we didn't have the last time. And then the charter schools less, transportation is less, Chapter 70 didn't change. So there's changes throughout the whole thing, and we'll send letters to the towns tomorrow explaining the whole thing to them.
So what is needed is just a reading of all of the motions, and then one single vote can be taken.
Happy to read it if nobody else wants to.
Go for it, Phil.
Here we go. These are always the fun ones, right? Here we go. So I need to make a motion for each one of these, correct, Jay?
I think what I would do is just read motion 1, read it, motion 2, read it, and then I think you can vote all 5 of them. Similar to like at a town meeting, we do what's called a consent calendar. You're going to do that same kind of process. If any one of you wants to question one of these motions, you should then pull that aside and talk about that. But I think you can just make one motion. I see Lee's nodding her head, so she must agree with me.
All right, so I make a motion to approve the next 5 motions that I read. So motion 1, to set the operational budget for the Mendon-Upton Regional School District for the 2020-2021 fiscal year at $37,501,581. That consists of general operations within a levy limit of $36,679,443 and debt service outside of the levy limit of $822,138. Motion 2 is to assess the town of Mendon $10,600,884 that consists of the following: minimum local contribution, $7,663,123. Non-discretionary charges, $915,732. Discretionary charges, $1,618,766. Long-term debt, Clough Memorial School, $334,878. Long-term debt, Misco Green Repair, $68,385. Motion 3 is to assess the town of Upton $12,642,253 that consists of the following: minimum local contribution, $9,136,616. Non-discretionary charges, $1,148,122. Discretionary charges, $1,938,640. Long-term debt, Clough Memorial School, $334,872. Long-term debt, Misco Green Repair, $84,003. Motion 4 is to appropriate $13,571,899 from state aid that consists of the following. Chapter 70 funds, $12,448,756. Regional transportation reimbursement, $446,000. Charter school tuition reimbursement, $24,679. Motion 5 is to appropriate $686,545 from the following school district sources. Vision sped tuition, $75,000. Transfer in from revolving accounts, $150,000. Medicaid reimbursement, $25,000. Debt service bond premium, $4,414. E&D appropriation, $432,131.
Second.
Start off the roll call, Sean.
John Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil Desutter, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Dorothy Scully, aye.
Vicki Ludwigson, aye. Okay. Anything else on that? Nope. All right,
Not for me.
move on to community comments. Let's see. So, seeing some comments, some questions about why other schools are still doing hybrid, and why are we remote? So, I mean, we touched on this a little bit. It's not just the community transmission, it's also the in-school transmission and the number of cases in district and the number of students in quarantine. Joe, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think the conventional wisdom was that there was going to be a post-holiday spike. And I think as we've seen definitely last week, first week coming out of the holiday, and a carryover over the weekend and today, a continuation of that.
There's a question on the pool testing, which you addressed.
Yeah, again, the webinar is tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. I hope to get all of the information that I can and report back.
Great. There's a question about consequences if we don't comply with the new DESE guidelines. I mean, our plan is to comply, so I'm not sure, in terms of the question is the plan to remain remote until we have a plan, but I see those two things as separate and not connected, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So there was a question about sending the elementary back when the spike is at the high school.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, looking at things this coming Thursday evening, we're very much going to disaggregate that by school. Obviously, our youngest learners are our high priority, as those with special needs are as well.
There's a question about the feedback from the survey and plans to improve the asynchronous days. I know we talked about that a little, but I would be interested in hearing more about that as well. So maybe, I don't know if that's possible to add to the agenda for the next meeting, but in terms of like what, some of the kind of the thinking in terms of the instructional model planning and like on those asynchronous days.
I think that's really going to go hand in glove with the whole student learning time requirements as well, Vicki.
Yeah, makes sense. Sorry, just trying to read through. Jennifer Shanahan asking, has the committee considered the possibility that the increase in student cases may be linked to kids not being in school and parents having play dates where masks, et cetera, are not regulated?
Well, to be very, very frank, I did report out in a couple emails that I've sent out to families. I think first we've got to be real explicit that the overwhelming majority of families are completely doing the right thing. But we also know that there's families that are traveling. We know that there was families that have gone on vacations, that have gone up north on ski trips and things of that sort. And we know that through the contact tracing process. And it's not only internally, it's through our two communities' boards of health that do that. So again, these are folks that are very much in the minority. They're not in the majority. They're not following, the public health guidelines. And in some cases, there's infections. So, we're directly tied to what's happening within the community.
There's a question about getting SPED students back to in-person learning during the remote weeks. So is there any discussion on that, or?
That's going to be the highest of priorities.
A request for an earlier decision on remote from Barbara Round.
Barbara, I put this out to the staff on Thursday evening. I would like to do that. Quite frankly, I cannot. And I can't because a lot of times the decisions are being made trying to get the maximum amount of data and seeing what the trends are. So that's why over the last 2 weeks, I've intentionally done it on Thursday evenings. That's giving somebody a weekday and the weekend to appropriately prepare. I completely appreciate for our staff, particularly at the elementary level, where it takes, it's very different planning for the hybrid model versus full remote. But it's not like I'm doing this intentionally. I'm doing this trying to maximize the amount of data to make the best possible decision.
So a question about when the schools will open, but I'm not clear on what the question is. That will be determined on Thursday, whether schools will be open next week. So there's questions about like focusing on the number of teachers in quarantine. There's no transmission in schools. Shouldn't the focus be on number of teachers in quarantine when deciding whether to go back to full remote or not? And that's clearly part of the equation. I'm not clear if I'm
It's
missing.
part of the equation, but it's not all of the equation.
Yeah.
For example, when we had the situation a few days before Christmas break to make the decision for Clough Elementary School to go into full remote, that was directly tied to the number of staff that were in quarantine. I believe it was in the ballpark of about 12 or 13. And that just became, quite frankly, a situation of coverage that we did not have an appropriate number of substitutes to safely cover classes.
More questions about survey results from Deb Lane about the survey for remote families. I believe that was originally scheduled for.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have not had time to appropriately process that and tabulate those results. I can say that that's going to be a high priority, and probably within the next couple of days that will be tabulated and posted on our district website.
And then along those lines, I think somebody asked about the survey results being broken down by school. I think that was more for a hybrid.
Yeah.
And in terms of specific things changed, I think that we kind of touched on that in terms of the asynchronous learning. There's many questions. All right. So we'll talk more at a future meeting about what changes were made. Talk of ordering some sort of, we talked about technology in order to potentially facilitate more, live instruction during the asynchronous days. So has anything kind of progressed on that front?
Again, I think, we talked about the whole live streaming piece, but I think we are also looking at some various apps that allow teachers to communicate with their kids during those asynchronous days in a more synchronous type fashion. So we'll have a little bit more on that the next meeting.
Another question from Deb Lane about Spanish immersion students. Why are the middle schoolers able to Zoom into their SI classes, but the elementary students cannot, specifically for SI?
I don't know specifically what she's talking about. I do know for our standalone remote students, they do have, while per se we do not have a Spanish immersion standalone remote program because it's just not feasible, we have at all levels created opportunities for Spanish immersion students in the standalone remote program to practice, mostly conversational practice with folks like the Spanish assistants who come over here each and every single year.
Question about changing. Is there any consideration in changing cohort groupings from alphabetical to by grade or school? I'm not sure what the intent is there.
Probably not, because realize there are a lot of considerations that go into the cohorts. And first and foremost, yes, you do arbitrarily, pick a spot in the alphabet to get roughly a 50-50 split. But again, as we talked about last summer, you want to keep siblings and families together. And then it comes down to, it becomes a lot more complex at the secondary level with kids changing classes and so on. So at the middle school, and particularly at the high school, there's a lot of hand scheduling that goes on. So that is a very long, arduous process. So chances are, as we progress into a new semester, the cohorts will probably in all likelihood stay the same.
Right. Some of this is we've covered. So moving down to, could Upton consider offering half-day kindergarten in September as an option? Some families with children who haven't had preschool because of COVID would prefer a shorter day to start.
We could consider that, and I think as a committee you could discuss that. I see that as probably a regression in what the district is offering for programming. And I guess I would counter with, every year, there's plenty of families that start their children in kindergarten without a preschool experience. So I do think it's viable, but I think, the closer, as we progress through the spring, it's something that could be discussed by the committee.
Question on the DESI guidelines. So you're going to report back in 2 weeks on the changes. Are those going to be implemented by next Tuesday is the question.
Yeah, they're supposed to be in place by next Tuesday.
Okay, so will parents hear from like their building principals on those changes?
Yes, yeah, we will put out a notification of what it is.
Okay. Question from Chris Patrick, will sports be reinstated next week?
Right now, the plan is yes, and right now it is a 1-week pause.
Great question from Katie Pereira. When will we have a more detailed description of a longer term plan to get the kids back on? So in terms of like, it sounds like in 2 weeks, we're going to hear more about like some of the plans for.
I think a lot of this, again, a lot of this is already happening as far as some of the planning process. A lot of it is tied to progression of the virus, but also, again, as I've said before, I'm cautiously optimistic with regard to progression of vaccination. And again, phase 2 in the Commonwealth is our educators, which is slated to start in February. So I think that'll also be a significant situation for our district.
There's a question about plans for another town hall with administration. So I know you said you're open to doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And another SI question, are the SI students that cannot practice with assistance because of the change of schedule be allowed to make up that time lost?
I don't know exactly what that means. Is the implication of that question compensatory services for Spanish immersion students?
Not sure.
I guess if that's the implication, my answer would be no. We're doing our absolute best to provide the best possible services given these challenging circumstances.
So there's a question from Sarah Cleary. Can Mendon-Upton offer help to fellow teachers, first responders, in other school districts who are not remote? I'm not sure what that means.
I don't understand either.
Okay. And last question, elementary SI work with aides has been sporadic, and for the past 3 weeks, we've had nothing. What can we expect and when? I would suggest reaching out to the teachers and the principals.
Correct.
Okay, so, right. I think. Okay, so move on. Are there any other matters not, oh, I'm sorry, do we have any correspondence?
We do not.
Okay. Any other matters not anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting? All right, so future agenda items are the rapid testing program and a follow-up of the district special education review on January 25th.
So Joe, do we think we'll have a time where we will be able to review the remote survey?
I can put it on in 2 weeks agenda, no problem, Phil.
Okay.
I should have that tabulated by the conclusion of this week. It's just, there's just been so many other things getting in the way.
Oh, yeah.
And then also with the holidays, it's been super challenging. And, I think I might have mentioned this at the last meeting. It's beautiful to put out a Google survey because A, it's free and it's, easy to push out. the problem is when you want to really drill down with data, I know we have a parent who really wants to see the results of the hybrid survey disaggregated by school, which I'm in complete agreement. I think that's a wonderful idea. It's a very time consuming process to pull that data out because you're literally working out of a Google Sheets spreadsheet and then kind of doing a lot of hand disaggregation. So it's very much time consuming, but it is important. We at a minimum, again, will have the standalone remote program survey results posted to our website, and we can do a quick review of that data 2 weeks from tonight.
Great, thanks.
I just want to comment, Joe, thanks for answering all those questions, and just God, my heart goes out to the community right now and the struggles you all are going through, and just please understand that the school district is full of very good people who are trying their best to provide the services for your kids. So we're all in pain here right now, but hang in there, please, and hopefully stay safe and try not to get sick so that we can all go back to school and go back to normal.
Well said. Thanks, Sean. All right, so with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second. Oh yeah, Sean Nicholson, aye.
Lee Martin, aye.
Phil DeZetter, aye.
Mary Lawrence, aye.
Dorothy Scully, aye.
Vicki Ludwigson, aye. We're adjourned at 8:03 p.m. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thanks.